Innocence. It's this word that we throw around like it's a virtue. It's a badge of purity. Somebody's innocent and suddenly they're untouchable, spared from blame or complexity. But what if innocence is simply ignorance dressed up with a better marketing? What if the idea of innocence is less about being pure and more about being unaware? And our culture just sells that as a virtue because it's so much easier to stomach. Think about it for a second. Innocence sounds like this soft and gentle thing, but underneath it's just the root of not knowing, not understanding the depths of pain, the weight of responsibility, or the shadows that creep beneath every human action. It's ignorance packaged as moral superiority. Now, philosophers have been circling this idea for ages. Rousseau, for example, idealized innocence as a state of nature, something that's pure and unspoiled, pre-social corruption. However, Friedrich Nietzsche saw it very differently. For him, innocence often meant weakness, or a refusal or an inability to face the harsh truths about life, the self and the power. Innocence, in Nietzsche's view, was not strength. Instead, it was just blindness. And that blindness was dangerous, not because innocence itself is inherently bad, but because it prevents growth. It's a place where you get stuck. You're safe, sure, but you're also very stagnant. Innocence shields you from the world's cruelty, yes, but it also shields you from the truth. It's a double-edged sword. However, where it gets tricky is that society prizes innocence. We want to believe in it because it comforts us. Innocent people aren't responsible for their faults, which means we don't have to reckon with the complexity of human action. We can paint the world in black and white, good and bad, right and wrong. Innocence allows us to avoid the uncomfortable messiness of grey space. But the problem is this. The moment that you cling onto innocence as a virtue, you start to refuse the burden of knowledge and choice. You stop questioning yourself and the world, and you stay sheltered while everything else changes around you. Innocence becomes a cage. It becomes a refusal to see how complicated and flawed you actually are. And what's worse is that cage is sold with good PR. There's so many movies, stories, even social media. They all love this innocent victim archetype. It's easy to root for. It's easy to support. It demands sympathy and it shields from criticism. But in reality, innocence is just not a shield from consequences. It's often the reason that we miss what we need to change. Being innocent means that you're not responsible, or at least you think so. But responsibility isn't punishment. Responsibility is growth. It's what forces you to see your shadows and your limits and your biases. It is what makes you human. Take Dostoevsky, for example. He wrote his characters drenched in guilt, burdened by their awareness of their sin and consequence. That weight, that uncomfortable, painful self-knowledge is the very thing that makes them alive. It's the very thing that makes so many people resonate with his books. Guilt isn't weakness. All it is proof that you have a conscience. Innocence would mean that they would never confront that. And I think I've either have uploaded already or I will upload a video based on this Dostoevsky guilt virtue. Moving on, I want you to look at it this way. Innocence is just ignorance with applause. It's the version of you before you wake up to the world's complexities and before you take a hard look at who you are and your own flaws without that light shining upon the darkness. It isn't a destination, but instead it's just a starting point. So why do we as people cling to innocence? Because facing reality is inherently terrifying. Facing those messy parts of yourself, admitting that you don't have all the answers and accepting that you're flawed and responsible is hard. And I cannot deny that from you. And you cannot deny that. That is a hard thing. Innocence feels like that refuge from that storm and those hardships. However, innocence is simply a false refuge. It's temporary, because true strength and true freedom aren't found in ignorance. They're found in clarity. They're found in that brutal acceptance of what is, not what we wish it were. It's the courage to stop pretending that you're perfect or unblemished and realizing and facing the chaos inside and outside of you. Innocence is a story that we tell ourselves so that we don't have to face that, so that we can avoid that. It's a narrative that softens reality, and it paints the world in easier colors so we can digest it and don't have to do the harder work. But growth never will occur in innocence. Growth happens in knowledge, and it happens in wrestling with the uncomfortable. It happens in losing and failing, and then taking those as acknowledgements to become a better version of yourself. It comes in owning mistakes and embracing them. So next time you hear somebody praised for their innocence, ask yourself this: is it really innocence that they entail, or is it just ignorance with good PR? And if it actually is, are you willing to trade that comfort for the discomfort of truth? Because the real journey is the one that leads to depth and wisdom and power. And that real journey begins when you stop hiding behind innocence and you start facing the raw complexities of life and the complicated reality of what it means to be human. Thank you.